Now you remember Jesus had 12 disciples, right? And he had these 12 disciples for 3 years. They followed him everywhere during his public ministry. Now, you can imagine that when you have 12 guys together who are living and eating and breathing and traveling together, there's bound to be some conflict like any group of people. In fact, there was this one time where Jesus' disciples, they're walking down this road toward Capernaum, and all of a sudden the disciples start arguing amongst each other. Now, Jesus hears the arguing, but he doesn't address it at the moment. He continues walking. He gets to Capernaum. They get into the house, and then he decides that he's going to address what they've been arguing. Okay, take a look at this. This is from Mark chapter 9, beginning at verse 33. It says, "They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, 'What were you arguing about on the road?' But they kept quiet, because on the way they had argued about who was the what? Who was the greatest?" Now, friends, imagine this for a moment, okay? You have 12 grown men who are walking down this road arguing about who is the greatest. Now, either they were bored to tears and they had nothing else to talk about, or they were finally vocalizing what they had been thinking all along. I mean, you can imagine how this went down. John's walking up ahead and somebody says, "Hey, John, why are you always walking in front of us like you think you're better than us?" And John turns around and says, "Well, because I am." And James says, "Well, that's not true. Who gets to sit next to Jesus when we eat? I get to sit next to Jesus when we eat. I'm the greatest of us." And Peter is like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, cool it, cool it. I was the first disciple that Jesus called, and on top of that, I got to walk on water. Did you? Huh? And Judas jumps in, and Judas is like, "Oh, hold on a second, guys. Jesus entrusts me with the money, so clearly I am the greatest among us." And you can just see this going on and on and on and on and on. Now notice, the disciples were embarrassed by their arguing, because when Jesus asked them what they had been arguing about, they didn't say anything. They were silent. But you know, Jesus is Jesus, so he knew what they were talking about, which is why he then says this in verse 35. Take a look. He says, "Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, 'Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all.'" Now, you and I as Christians today, we understand this concept because you've grown up in church. You kind of know this is how it is. But imagine for a moment that you are the disciples, and this is the first time you've ever heard this teaching. Imagine how strange this must have been to hear from Jesus himself. Because back in that time, even in our culture today, if you want to be great, you got to be what? First, not last. Last is embarrassing. Last is shameful. Last is not the place you want to be if you are desiring to be great. I mean, imagine for a moment if Jesus said, "All right, guys, let's go outside. We're going to have a race." And the 12 disciples race, and Peter finishes first. Andrew is like dead last, and Jesus goes, "Congratulations, the winner is Andrew." And everybody's like, "What? Jesus, what are you talking about? Were you even watching the race? Like, clearly Andrew was last by a mile. I mean, what does that even mean? That doesn't make any sense. Peter clearly won." You can imagine how difficult this must have been for them to hear that the first shall be last, the last shall be first. But Jesus is very clear, isn't he? Hey, if you want to be first, you got to be last. You got to be the servant of everybody. And they just don't seem to get it.